The story? I'll tell you the story. Story about the dogs. Alright. So back in early 2000s, a man we'll call Henry bought 70 acres of county land. He got it out of steal and developed it into a nice neighborhood with big houses. You know the kind. Mostly out of everyone's price range around here, but hey, it was nice. Who wouldn't want an upscale neighborhood right in the middle of this poverty-ridden, run-down, backwoods town? We all laughed at the old man, thinking he was going to be in for a big shock when no rich people wanted to buy a home there. Then, the big sign at the main road went up. Quail Run. I thought the name was cheesy, but it had some rural charm. When the houses went on the market, I had to check out the prices. Just the masochist in me, wanting to know just how far out of my reach they really were. Secretly, I dreamed of owning a home half as nice as the ones in Quail Run, but I would never have admitted that to anyone. A man does have his reputation to think about, especially in a redneck-riddled place like this. At first, my wife and I thought it was a misprint on the realtor's website. There was no way any of those 32 houses could have been in our price range. Not with her being a substitute teacher and me working at the tire factory. And at work, the houses and their ridiculously low prices were all anyone could talk about. Every break they were oohing and awing over them. And from what I gathered, well, the prices were right. Now, Eddie said Henry was probably slipping in his old age, but I just couldn't see that. He was a shrewd old goat. Hell, he owned half of the county. But he also wasn't one to be losing money. And from the looks of the houses, they cost way more to build than what he was selling them for. Angie and I were the 8th couple to buy into Quail Run. The house was 2.5 stories with an attached 2-car garage. In the backyard, we had an in-ground pool and a large gazebo. The best part? Well, our mortgage, though it stretched out 25 years, the monthly payment was a little less than what we had been paying for rent. Eventually, we would own our home and the nearly 2 acres it sat on. We lived at the end, in a cul-de-sac. Directly across from us was another house, but it was still empty. By the end of the year, 21 of the 32 houses had been bought, and we knew most of the people personally. The houses were spaced out well enough that no one was too close, but you could still stand in the yard and yell to get someone's attention. Angie and I settled in nicely, and much quicker than I thought we would ever have. We didn't have kids, and the big house kind of felt empty. And since Angie was there more than I was, well, she suggested we get a dog. We settled on a German short-haired pointer puppy from the shelter. Brandy was her name. She was perfect, lovable, easy to train, and had enough energy to keep us busy all the time. We installed a 4-foot chain link fence around our massive backyard so Brandy had plenty of room to run. Her hunting instincts were strong, which led her to bring us the occasional squirrel or bird and leave it on the back porch. Later, when I put in the doggy door, she even brought in a raccoon and laid it at the foot of the stairs. Angie wasn't too pleased with that, but she was a pup. Now, it took some training, but Brandy finally stopped bringing us her trophy kills. As she got older, her hunting instinct was satisfied by hunting treats. Angie and I would hide all over the yard, even inside the house. After a while, it seemed everyone in the neighborhood had dogs, and I wondered if they had found their homes as big and empty and lonely feeling as we had. When Brandy was a little over a year old, the Quail Run dog started doing something we all sort of got a kick out of. Not every evening at dusk, they would all go outside, and start talking to each other. I mean, that's the only way I know how to describe it. Angie called it the doggy gossip hour. It wasn't the loud, annoying barking and baying and howling that nearly everyone hates. It was more toned down than that. It was just our dogs having a friendly, communal chat. Brandy would go to the fence facing the front of the house and interject her 2 cents worth every evening too. We thought it was cute, and it became our ritual to sit on the front porch enjoying a beer or two in the evenings when the doggy gossip hours started. Sitting outside with my wife, chatting about the day and having a few drinks beat the hell out of sitting cooped up in the house watching Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune. And the house across from us sat empty, even after we'd lived there for about 3 years. A few times a year, a man came to perform maintenance on the place. And each time, we wondered if someone might be looking to buy it, but no one ever did. I thought it was good because we could have neighborhood barbecues, using the center of the paved turnaround to park the grills and folding tables. There was room for everybody. During the summer, there were barbecues at least twice a month, and over half of them were right in front of our house. If someone had moved into the other house, they might not have liked our little gatherings. Or, well, they might have. I mean, who knows? But Angie seemed bothered by that empty house across the way more with every passing week. She said it looked sad without a family in it. And what I thought she really meant was she was sad because she wanted kids. Admittedly, it was getting to be the time when we should have a family if we were going to. One evening, as we sat on the porch while Brandy gossiped with the other dogs, Angie brought up the subject of having kids. I wasn't shocked or put off by the subject. I had been expecting it for a while, and so we tiptoed around the subject for a good half an hour, talking in hypothetical terms to start with. When the conversation took a turn for the more serious part of actually laying out a plan, Brandy gave 3 short woofs, like she did when a visitor approached. I turned, and she was pointing up the street as well as she could from inside the fence, thinking she had spotted a squirrel or a possum. I shrugged off her behavior and turned back to Angie. She was determined the best time for her to fall pregnant would be in the next 2 months, so that she could be in the later part of her pregnancy during the cold months and give birth in early spring. Now, I won't lie, I was shocked at how much detailed thought she had put into the idea. Teasing, I asked if the amount of scheduling didn't take the fun out of the whole process. I liked the idea of nature taking its course, but she wasn't hearing it though. And then Brandy growled and immediately pointed straight across the street. I shielded my eyes against the street lamp and squinted into the darkness beyond. I saw nothing. Angie shivered, eyed the empty house, and asked if we could continue our talk indoors. She said the house was giving her the creeps, as if someone watched her from one of the dark windows. Opening the front door, I let her step inside. Then I snapped my fingers at Brandy and told her to go inside as I motioned toward the back of the house where her doggy door was. Glancing at me, she woofed once and pointed into the darkness across the street again. Walking slowly to the edge of the grass, I gave the property over there a good scan. Still, I saw nothing. A raunchy smell drifted from the other side of the road, though. Behind me, Brandy whined, danced back and forth at the fence, and poking her nose through the diamond-shaped holes. As I turned back to the empty house, a shadow moved, just slightly, at the far corner. It could have been the wind moving a tree limb or simply an eye twitch. A feeling of impending doom, approaching danger, washed over me and my skin tightened. My senses heightened, and I fought the urge to turn around and run. A moment later, unable to contain the panic, I spun on my heel to go inside. I refused to run and give in completely to my unfound fear. But I wasn't going to stand out there and tempt fate. Better safe than sorry, as my dad always said. Before I reached the porch steps, Brandy backed away from the fence and then bounded over it effortlessly. She zipped across the road before I could yell at her to stop. I took off after her, not wanting her to get hurt. And at that moment, I realized the terrible smell could have been a bear. And a bear would kill Brandy. I caught her in the backyard just before she reached the tree line to the forest. Well, she stopped and was pointing into the woods. I looked for movement, but all I saw was the morphing of shadows. The leaves rattled softly against each other, sounding like a brook, where the water flows gently over rocks. Taking Brandy's collar, I tugged her, but she refused to move. She yanked forward, and it was like she launched forward. The force jerked me off balance. Landing on a knee in one hand, I yelled at her to stop. But then there she went, into the trees and out of sight. I moved as close as I dared to the thick darkness of the forest, and I yelled for Brandy over and over again. She didn't bark much, and all I could hear was the sound of something crashing through the underbrush. Angie yelled from the middle of the street, and I ran for her, stopping her from coming closer to the unknown danger our dog was chasing through the trees. I took her back to the house, insisting that she stay inside. The other dogs were talking back and forth when I went out armed with a flashlight and an old hunting rifle. Brandy met me in the street. She panted and gave me her wide, goofy dog smile as she circled around me and moved toward the house. Relieved she was okay, I took her inside. Now, the next evening, Angie and I sat on the porch, beers in hand again. Brandy was at the fence, and everything was normal. Until all of the dogs went silent at the same time. Angie had been raising her bottle and stopped with the beer halfway between the table and her mouth, her eyes going big as she looked at me. And the silence stretched out. I shrugged at Angie. Her cell phone rang, causing us both to jump and then laugh nervously as she answered. It was Nicole, who's our closest neighbor. Angie told her everything was fine where we were, but that we had noticed that all the dogs going silent at the same time. I looked around at Brandy, and she stood a few feet away from the fence, scenting the air, moving farther back and shivering. Then we decided we should all go inside. Whatever had caused the dogs to go quiet might be whatever Brandy had chased the previous night, and I had no desire to face whatever could silence every dog in the neighborhood and cause our brave Brandy to act so shifty. Brandy parked herself on our bed, wedging between us. She had a little raised dog bed at the window, and usually she was quite happy there, but not that night. Now, a little before 2 a.m., she woke me up whining and shifting back and forth. I petted her, trying to quiet her, but she focused on the open doorway and back toward the head of the bed until her butt was against the headboard. And I sat at the edge of the bed, completely unnerved by her odd behavior. Angie woke up and asked, "What's going on?" And Brandy pressed her full weight onto Angie and whined low. I put my finger to my lips and eased toward the door. The smell was thinner and less pungent than it had been 2 nights before, but it was the same. Only this time, it was in my house. I had left my rifle in the downstairs coat closet in the front room. I didn't hear any movement upstairs and I edged toward the stairs. If there was an animal in the house, I had to go get the rifle. It couldn't be a raccoon or possum if Brandy was scared of it. The farther down the stairs I went, the stronger the wet bear smell became. Wet bear and soured milk with undertones of rotten meat. The more smells I could pick out, the more scared I became. Had a bear somehow gotten into the house? Would a rifle defend me against even the small black bears of the area? Arming sweat from my forehead, I paused 3 risers from the living room floor. To my right lay the kitchen and back door, in front of me, and stretching to my left, the living room, which I could see. There was nothing in the living room, but anything could be standing in the kitchen just around the other side of the wall, waiting for me to come into view. The closet door was tantalizingly close, just past the archway leading to the kitchen. I stepped to the bottom riser and paused again. Something thudded against the back door. Was it from inside or outside? The doggy door rattled and the flap slapped heavily back into place, and I held my breath, smiling with some relief. It was probably just a raccoon or possum after all. Peeking around the wall, I looked toward the back door, bending so that I could see under the table. And the thump came again. It was definitely outside the door. Thump. Thump. The doorknob rattled. A chill lit down my back. What I was hearing was the sound of someone or something bumping their shoulder into the door as they tried to turn the knob. And the person also tried to come through Brandy's door. Leaping, I snatched open the closet and grabbed my rifle. As I reached the kitchen, I screamed, "I'm calling the cops." And I was going to, but the phone was on the end of the counter next to the door. And the intruder stopped. I pointed the gun at the door and stepped lightly toward the phone. Behind me, claws on tile. I spun, bringing the gun around. It was Brandy. I flipped the barrel toward the door again and tried to shoo her away, but she pushed between my legs and the door, shivering and whining. She pushed her side against my leg as if trying to push me away from the door. Stretching, I grabbed the phone. "I'm calling the cops. They'll be here any minute." I knew it was a stupid lie as soon as I said it. Hell, I couldn't even say it with conviction. It would be at least 15 minutes before a cop could get here anyway. I dialed the number and held the phone between my shoulder and ear, keeping the gun pointed at the door. I could barely hear Brandy growling. The sound vibrated from her side into my leg, and she pushed against me harder, never taking her eyes from the doggy door. The operator answered just as a mangy arm shot through Brandy's door. Its long, fingered hand splayed and grasped. Using my leg as a springboard, Brandy lunged forward, snapping at the clawed hand. My sock slipped on the tile, and I slammed my hip into the counter, dropping the phone. And just then, Angie yelped and then screamed as she flipped on the light and saw Brandy fighting with that horribly malformed arm. She dove for the phone and started yelling information into it. I grabbed Brandy's collar and pulled her back. The body attached to the arm slammed into the door, and Brandy shot forward, catching the arm at the wrist. She twisted her head violently and came away with a patch of fur and skin. The creature wailed and the arm retreated. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before. The scream of pain was almost human. but it was mixed with an animalistic growl. Brandy went for the doggy door and I caught her. Falling to my knees, I hugged her to me with one arm, but her size made it almost impossible to hold her as she struggled to get away. Angie appeared and snapped the leash onto Brandy's collar. The creature outside fell silent. I let Angie pull her dog backward across the tile, and I have no doubt if she could have gotten traction, Brandy would have gone after that thing, and it probably would have killed her. Standing, feeling as if I were in the middle of a nightmare, I flipped on the outside lights and peered out the windows above the sink. And my heart hammered so hard it sent shockwaves through my vision. I thought I might pass out as I leaned close to the glass. Whatever had been out there had gone. Now, Angie was still on the phone with 911. She was frantic, her wide, terrified eyes sweeping back and forth as she clutched the leash and stood there with her back to the wall. Brandy whined and tried to charge forward, her claws scraping against the slick floor. I took the leash from my wife, laid the rifle on the table, and we waited for the cops to show up. As they walked up to the front door, Angie bumped past me, grabbed a plastic baggie from the cabinet and her vinyl dishwashing gloves. She picked up the patch of skin and hair Brandy had torn from the monster's arm and crammed it into the baggie with a look of horror and disgust. She closed it and placed it in the cabinet under our sink and tossed the gloves in the trash. The cops knocked at the door and announced themselves, and Angie told the operator they had arrived and hung up. After a cursory search, the cops said it was most likely a bear, although we knew better. They had to take pictures of the damage, and a guy came later who took samples of the blood drips on the back stoop and around the doggy door. They checked that my rifle hadn't been fired and made sure Brandy's shots were up to date. It was a huge hassle that lasted until morning. They had to rule out the possibility of it being a person who had lost the blood. Couldn't have an injured burglar running around the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, we got a call from the police department. The analysis of the blood came back as a tainted sample, which meant the specific animal couldn't be identified. It was definitely animal blood, though, so there was nothing for us to worry about. Most likely a bear, and, well, to have a nice day. Angie shook her head. I told you they would say it was a bear. We still have the patch of skin and fur Brandy tore from that thing's arm. We know it was not a bear. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a bear.